Hi, and today I'm going to talk about coping with stress and how a lot of stress comes from mental narratives attached to the ego and the false sense of self. And when we're stressed, often it comes down to our thoughts, and a lot of our thought processes are on negative attachments to certain outcomes. And the first step is being able to be reflective of those thoughts. And often we're so engrossed within our thoughts of, what if this goes wrong? I can't do this. I can't meet this deadline. I can't go to this event. That we end up not being able to step back and reflect on that. And so breath work and focusing on the breath in mindfulness is a useful way of being able to step back from the thoughts. And I'll put a link to a video on that. And another useful way is asking ourselves, what will my next thought be? Because when we ask that, it sort of helps us switch out of our thoughts to be able to step back and begin to observe them and have an awareness of them. And once we're able to do that, we can begin to quietly reflect on them and look at the mental narratives that are appearing beneath the surface, I'm stressed because my deadline is in a week, narratives that are on the surface when we're in our thoughts. And instead looking back, reflecting and watching why we're stressed. Why are we feeling this way about a certain event or thing we have to do? And often a lot of these thoughts, when we step back and have an awareness of them, revolve around fear and are driven by what Eckhart Tolle calls the ego and the false sense of self. And I'll put a link to a video I did on the ego in more detail. And the ego revolves around fear and often attaches itself and a false sense of self on external characteristics, and we can only be happy when we've done a certain task, or we can only be happy when I've completed this event or I've done this thing in a certain way, and my self-worth is also attached to that, and being able to be loved is attached to that. And it revolves a lot around these attachments, or ego attachments as Eckhart Tolle calls them. And this is what causes us stress, because when we begin to step back and reflect on our thoughts, everyone's different, but a lot of them can revolve around, what if I don't complete this task? And a fear of failure, a fear if I do this wrong, I won't be loved. If I can't complete this, people won't like me. If I don't do it this certain way, I won't be happy. All these sort of narratives around happiness and self-worth and love attached to certain things happening in a certain way. And the stress that we feel comes from the lack of control we have over that, and feeling that we're not happy right now and loved because we're placing that on this thing happening in a certain way. So we're denying ourselves almost the ability to be happy right now because we're attaching it to this external outcome that we want to happen. And this is what causes us stress, because there's a gap between those two things, and the attachment is so strong to a thing turning out a certain way that we can't control that, and that makes us anxious and stressed because it's in the future a lot of the time. It can be in the past as well, and we can't control that, and that causes us stress. And reflecting on these mental narratives and the narratives that the ego and false sense of self are attaching to is useful in being able to then start to break them. And when we're observing these thoughts, it's good and very useful to not judge them. We're not trying to attach a further narrative onto it of, oh, I'm thinking this certain way, so I must be like this. We're completely stepping back and reflecting on them from a place of non-judgment and awareness. And once we can recognize where they're coming from, if they're based often on fear and this false sense of self attaching those things to certain outcomes and that's the only way we can be happy. Recognizing that is an important step in being able to then detach from them, and accepting that those are there is the first step in then being able to accept them and then let them go. And we can begin to let them go and let go of these attachments by recognizing that we're whole and complete as we are in the present moment. That's the only moment we can have right now to be happy. And Thich Nhat talks about we're very good at preparing to live, but not very good at living. And we can sacrifice 10 years to a degree and a job and think we'll be happy at the end of that, but we're not very good at being happy right now and living life fully and authentically as ourselves right now. And that when we live in a state of love for ourselves, that we're whole and complete as we are right now, we are enough, and that we can be happy right here, right now, because we're whole and complete, we can begin then to do these tasks and things that may have caused us stress before, but enjoy the process, enjoy the moment to moment, because we can let go of this attachment of self-worth and happiness can only happen if a thing goes a certain way. And it's a gradual process. It doesn't just happen at the flick of a switch, but the gradual reflection on our thoughts and narratives, recognizing it's coming from this false sense of self, and then being able to come from a place of loving kindness and compassion to ourselves, and then working on loving kindness and giving ourselves that love, and that we can be happy right here, right now. We're whole and complete. We do not need things to go a certain way to be happy, and we can be loved and are loved right now. And we can give ourselves that love as well, because we can live in a state of love. And if we're living in a state of fear, we can't be in a state of love. And when we're stressed, we're in that state of fear and ego attachments to certain outcomes. So I hope that's been useful in a way of looking at why we're stressed and the underlying mental narratives that are behind it. I'll put a link to a load of books on this and helpful ways of beginning to break those attachments and being able to give ourselves that love and live fully in the present moment, which can then allow us to enjoy the tasks that we're having to do more and be fulfilled and live authentically to ourselves, which in turn will allow us to be happy and not stressed. And I'll put those below, and I'll see you guys all really soon.